So now we're going to move on to a magical panel. Magic's going to happen during the next little bit. Our next conversation is about cultivating community scribes in South Jersey, because that's what happens when a foundation, community foundation, a humanities nonprofit, and a journalism organization come together to explore the local news scene in South Jersey. So we're talking about the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, together with the Community Foundation of South Jersey and the Journalism and Design program at the New School. They're going to talk about their Spring 22 Democracy and the Informed Citizen Community Scribe program. They trained more than 15 community members from a variety of 6 municipalities in South Jersey on the basics of citizen-driven journalism. So I'd like to welcome Valerie Popp, Debbie Esposito, Eric Estrada, and Cole Goins to the stage. And Valerie, I will hand it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everybody. As Stephanie said, I'm Valerie Popp, and I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, or NJCH. That's how you'll hear me referring to us throughout the course of the day. And on behalf of the entire panel, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our presentation on cultivating community scribes in South Jersey. I was talking to the control room earlier. I think we are still waiting for one of our panelists to join, Debbie Esposito, who is from Winslow Township. Excuse me, as soon as she's on, we'll get going with the conversation part of it. But for now, we have a little bit of time because I'm going to give you an overview of our program and talk to you about the history of it, how we all came together to begin with. And I think, as you'll see from the program overview, this work really began in that mythical era known as pre-pandemic times. Oh, there's Debbie. Hey, Debbie. Yay, we have a full panel. Yay. This work first began before the pandemic, and there's been a lot of fits and starts along the way, and I think a lot of you can relate to that. And I just want to say that Stephanie and the team at CCM have been there with us through so much of this to offer introductions and to provide counsel. And I think, most importantly of all, to remind us constantly of how immensely fun and immensely rewarding and needed this kind of work is for communities in the state. So we're really happy to have the chance to share all our work with all of you today. I'm co-presenting alongside 3 other members of our team, whom you see up on the screen up there: Debbie Esposito, Communications Chair of We Are Winslow and a 2022 Community Scribe; Eric Estrada, Community Manager at the Community Foundation of South Jersey; and the face that's probably most familiar to all of you, Cole Goins, who's the Engagement Lead at the Journalism and Design program at the New School. So that's our panel. We wrapped up a little slideshow for all of you today, but I think we all have similar feelings about slideshows, which is that it's great to hold history and stuff, but then we want to get out of that as soon as we can and get into the rich and meaty part, which is going to be the conversation among the 4 of us, but then we hope with all of you, and we're going to have substantial time for Q&A at the end. And we hope to hear your questions about, sort of what it's like to create this kind of collaboration, if you're interested in doing something like it in the future, and lessons and learnings, from doing this kind of work together in New Jersey. So I am going to share my screen here. So those of us who are part of this this program, occupy really different roles in the project, and we all bring very diverse, I think, professional experience and lived experience to our work together. So some of what you're going to hear today is that we want to think and talk with all of you about, sort of what happens when all of these perspectives and different organizational energies, right? Because we all really work in different fields with their own languages, with their own customs, with their own ways of working. What happens when all of that comes together to try to support the work of local journalism in one area? So what we're going to do for you today is we'll go through program history, and we're going to have a conversation, and we'll open it up to Q&A. The program history. So who are the community scribes? I think is a question that all of you are probably wondering about. Why is this program focused on South Jersey? And this is the question. This last one is a question I've gotten a lot, whether in verbalized or in looks and like side comments. But why the heck is a humanities organization asking as the convener of journalism-related work? I think it's really important to start to tease out why on earth an organization like NJCH is charged with doing this. So. NJCH, for those of you who don't know us, we are a 501c3 that's based out of Rutgers Camden in Camden, down at the southern part of the state, that works to explore, cultivate, and champion the public humanities in New Jersey. If you're familiar at all with the National Endowment for the Humanities, we often refer to ourselves as the state arm of the NEH, and indeed we are principally funded by grants through the NEH. I think it's important to say that we occupy kind of that middle position. We both distribute grants to organizations around New Jersey, but we are also the recipients of grants from both the NEH, from NJCIC now, and from other foundations, and indeed from individual donations around the state. So we're in that space where when you talk about, you know, sort of the challenges of working with grantors, like, we hear you because we do that as well. And you'll hear me talk a little bit about what that's like today. So back in 2017, and in the wake of the 2016 presidential election, the Pulitzer Prize has teamed up with this organization called the Federation of State Humanities Councils to launch an initiative called Democracy and the Informed Citizen. So the initiative basically aimed to explore how journalism and the humanities could come together in the service of democratic health and civic health in the US. To enrich understanding of local and national issues and to inspire a more engaged citizenry. The foundation, the federation, which by the way is kind of the umbrella organization for all of the state humanities councils. There are 56 of us, so one in each state, DC, and in a number of US territories. The federation teamed up with the Pulitzers and then got funding from the Mellon Foundation to award grants to humanities councils around the state to design programming. And the programming was really, really varied, ranged from sort of public forums, speaking engagements where they brought in Pulitzer Prize winning journalists to towns that don't typically have access to that kind of programming, student workshops and institutes on media literacy, a whole range of things. And I'm happy to share a full list of the Democracy and the Informed Citizen projects at all of the other state humanities councils in the chat later on. So the reason why state humanities councils were chosen as sort of conduits for this work is twofold. The first is that I think it's important to note that, you know, program officers and directors at state humanities councils really, really understand every corner of their state. And they've been doing this work, you know, often through relationships between community members that, you know, and through the work of sustained community building and investment and mutuality for often like 20, 30, 50 years in some cases, right? And JCH has been working in New Jersey since 1972. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary. So when we say that we understand this state, we really mean it. And those kinds of longstanding relationships are tremendously important. When you have that kind of trust going in to do this kind of relationship, you know, relationship-centric work of community reporter training, that's invaluable, right? So if you name a community, the chances are, you know, across the US for any humanities council, those are the people who can bring, you know, point you towards some of the most compelling oral historians in your state, storytellers, right? And we'll circle back to that later on when we talk about the mechanics of this program. And I think the second reason is that we're great at bringing people together to talk about really contentious, difficult topics. That is what the humanities do. I think most people are familiar with the way that the humanities can activate that in classrooms, but we also do that, and this is where, you know, the state councils come in. We also do that in realms well beyond classrooms, because as we all know, not everyone has access to a classroom. Not everyone wants to be in a classroom, right? And I think that that's also an important piece of this kind of programming, is to acknowledge that and to talk about alternative spaces, right, where you can have these kinds of conversations together. So in 2019, NJCH applied and received a Democracy and the Informed Citizen grant to explore the interactions of small town residents with local and regional news. And this is really where our conversation with the Center for Cooperative Media and some of the other outlets and organizations in the state got going. The regional focus was originally supposed to be South Jersey. You know, this is a part of the state, we can all speak to this, I think, to some degree, that's seen really precipitous declines in access to traditional media, but that also has really important and often unsung reservoirs of economic, social, political, cultural vibrancy, right? And Eric can talk more about that later in our conversation. The original plan was to work with the Community Foundation of South Jersey, the Center for Cooperative Media, and Stockton University to embed journalists alongside humanities scholars in 6 South Jersey communities that were part of what's called Transform South Jersey. This is an initiative that's led by Eric and his CFSJ counterparts, and it's in 6 towns. So it's Downe, Hammonton, Salem, Willingboro, Winslow, and Woodbury, all my W's, that had already agreed to be part of this resident-driven multi-year community change initiative. So this is 2019, and then of course the pandemic hits and everything goes awry. And Eric and Debbie can talk about what this is like, but when the pandemic hit, that entirely changed the tenor of the work that Transform South Jersey was doing. It transformed the abilities of the communities themselves to do this work, right? Because everyone, from what we were hearing, everyone was feeling burned out, right? So how on earth can you do this kind of work when you need to focus upon, community care at the most fundamental level? So this meant that we had to revamp the entire program. And unfortunately, we had to do it in a relatively short period, since the grant maker and funder, despite, sort of entreaties across the US from all of the state humanities councils doing this work, did not want to extend the program period, right? We all know what that's like. They didn't want to do that. Although afterwards, they granted extensions after the term ended, by the way, and I have a lot to say about that later. As we sort of get into what it's like to sort of have to work with those kinds of restrictions. Eric and I had conversations with a lot of the residents in the TSJ towns, with a number of all of you who are on this call, who report in the South Jersey beat, to sort of think about what kind of programming would be most useful, right? And we heard 2 things. So first thing that we heard was that people in the TSJ communities wanted broadened access to the journalists and media makers who are already on the South Jersey beat. Right, that was something we kept hearing over and over and over again. And then the second thing was that the members of the communities wanted some sort of opportunities for individual residents to get training in the work of community journalism at little or no cost, right? And once we heard that, we were sort of like, okay, well, we can offer those 2 things. That's what we decided to offer the communities in the program. I'm not going to go into the fine points of this, because I think they're going to emerge in the conversation, but you can see some of it up here. It talks a little bit about exactly how we did this. But when we presented the opportunities to the members of the TSJ communities, what we heard unanimously was that they wanted the community scribe reporter training option. They wanted to learn how to do this work together in concert with journalists who spent their lives doing this sort of training. And that is where I'm happy to say we were fortunate enough to be able to partner with Cole and the J&D team to think about how to design, develop, and administer this curriculum for spring 2022. So I hope that is a not too overly long condensed history of exactly how we got to this point. And now I would love to hand it over to Cole to talk a little bit about that curriculum, what it meant to create this, and then we're going to open it up for conversation and get into some really, naughty questions about what it was like to build this darn thing. So Cole, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Valerie. Yeah, so just a quick background, journalism and design, we're a program out of the New School, which is based in New York. And, we teach journalism, and it's specifically journalism that's rooted in human-centered design and systems thinking. And so it's like a deep part of our, our pedagogy, and what we try to incorporate into the way that we teach is, how do we make journalism that's rooted in, what people need? How do we get creative with that journalism and be responsive with our work? A big part of our program, and for many years, we've worked to open source a lot of the curriculum and a lot of the core, just everything from exercises that our faculty do in their classrooms to some of the, just the syllabi and curriculum over the years that we've used, and have tried to make those available to educators and anyone who wants to use them. I'll share a link to our website where there's a bunch of open resources that anyone's welcome to use that kind of incorporate some of these exercises and a focus on design, systems thinking, and just teaching fun ways to teach journalism is what we're all about. And so most recently, we also have a lab side at journalism and design, which is what I work for, where we do community-based programs that we get grants to do work outside of the actual university, right? So that's part of where this collaboration comes in. And the past couple of years, we've been working a lot with community colleges and community-based organizations to basically expand access to journalism education, right? To take what we're doing in the program and build on it to equip more people with the tools of journalism as a means to promote greater civic engagement, media literacy, all the things that Valerie has just been talking about that were like the core of this program. And we were lucky enough to get in touch with Valerie, I think last year to start thinking about what this could look like as a collaboration. And we had already kind of piloted a proof of concept in Philadelphia with the Community College of Philadelphia. You'll see basically we built like the curriculum that we use for the Community Scribes program. We based it off of an initial certificate program that we launched at CCP, which was called Community Journalism for Civic Power. And I will also share a link to the curriculum. We open sourced that curriculum that we used. It was a 6-week workshop series that was free and open to anyone who wanted to take it. And so we talked with Valerie and the team once, she had heard from the communities that they really wanted this training, right? They wanted to get the skills themselves and to be able to do this kind of community-based storytelling. And we put together 4 modules that reflected what people were saying that they wanted, the types of skills that they wanted. And they basically included interviewing. We're just seeing on the screen, what's news to you? So even just exploring the idea of what is news and like what people want from the news, as a lot of us know, right? It's often not, traditional news is not often reflective of, what people are really looking for, or there's a lot of narratives that exist about communities that people want to shift or counter in some way. And so, had that discussion. We did a whole design sprint where we learned the whole design thinking process for those of you who are familiar with design thinking, and tried to dream up like what it would look like if we created our own news products for our communities. So those are a couple of the modules that we did. I'll share a link shortly in the chat to our curriculum so you can see that. Anybody is welcome to adapt it. And I will give a shout out to, we also got to work last year with the grantees of the Civic Information Consortium and offered, some of our curriculum. We worked with, and learned from a lot of the grantees. I think several of the folks are here on the call. I know Simon from Bloomfield and the Stories of Atlantic City team who both used some of the tools that we had, and we learned from the programs that you all were doing as well. So we got the opportunity to really build on and really deepen what we were offering on the community side. So I think we got a really good response from it, and we're excited to kind of build on this. And I think, Valerie, you might talk about this a little bit more, but we recently got a grant from the Civic Information Consortium to work with community colleges across New Jersey to launch more of these certificate programs in the state, which is actually feedback that we got from the scribes. Once the training was done, someone wrote, "This should be a certification, right? There should be something official around this." And we were like, "Hey, glad you suggested that, right? We have an idea." And so we're excited to kind of build on that. So if you're interested in learning more about either using some of the resources that we have to share the tools of journalism, get in touch, and we can, again, I'll share a link to the curriculum, and we're excited to kind of build on where we're going with this next phase with the Civic Info Grant. And I'll toss it back to Valerie.
Thanks, Cole. Awesome. Yeah, Cole, you weren't on earlier. I was put on the spot during the NJCIC funding session to talk a little bit about the community college project, but you did it in a much more eloquent way. So I'm happy that you were here to do that. Yeah, we're always happy to talk a little bit more about what that project looks like, where it's going to go. It's still very much in early stages, but I think we have a great foundation. And as Cole said, this is an idea that did indeed come from one of our community scribes themselves at the start of this project. So when we talk about genuinely centering community needs and wishes in program design, right, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. So I'm going to open this up to conversation now, the exciting part, which is the sort of conversation among the 4 of us. And I think one of the things that I'd love to do, since Cole and I got a little bit of a chance to talk about sort of why we were invested in this project, is to open it up to Eric and Debbie in particular. And if the 2 of you could talk about why you and your organizations felt like it was important to participate in this kind of programming, that would be great. Eric, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So excited to be here. So excited to be a part of this group with folks I consider friends now. that are doing amazing work across South Jersey and New Jersey and even beyond. For the Community Foundation of South Jersey specifically, we have doubled down isn't even enough, tripled down, quadrupled down on the notion that for philanthropy to effectively impact our portion of the state, we cannot focus solely on money in and out. It's not only about the relationships, but our work really is about investing in what we call, and we didn't invent it, the notion of community leadership. And so Transform South Jersey was an initiative designed to really put into practice all of the things that we consider community leadership. But those were ideas, thoughts, theories, things that, in our world that we work in, kind of made sense, but how do we turn that into practice? And one of the pieces that we realized very quickly is that so much of what happens in community is connected to the stories that get told about community and who tells those stories. So I've been blessed and very fortunate to work with a number of folks that have always highlighted and shared the importance of things around the notion of who tells stories matter, not only in determining what stories get told, but how they're told. So we knew this was a natural part of work that had to be connected to all the work that we're doing. And so for us at the Community Foundation, when we were presented with the opportunity to partner with the Council for the Humanities, to partner with the New School of Design and Journalism Design, and partner with our communities that were already doing work, it was a no-brainer. We had to get involved to make sure that the residents themselves, who were already determining what mattered most to them, were also shaping the stories, not only in their community, but in the region that aligned with that. So I'm more than happy to get into deeper details, but I would pause there now just to please let Debbie speak about her own experience in the program and what drew her to be a part of it.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so I'm trying to listen and decide where to start with this. So I came to this work through my work with We Are Winslow. So We Are Winslow was one of the 5 Transform South Jersey grant recipients. We're community group 6. I'm sorry, I'm looking at 6. I'm sorry. Grant recipients, and the work that we were involved with, I came to this work with the interest in learning more about community heart and soul. We use the community heart and soul process in our community organizing, which is based on the 3 tenets of identifying what matters most, involving everyone, and playing the long game. So we asked what matters most to who? And that's what matters most to the people in our township, right? In terms of community development. So what is it that the residents in the community are interested in? What do we want to see? What do we want to see? What businesses do we want to see brought? What kind of recreation do we want to see come to our town? What do we want? What do we want our town to look like, right? In order to make it a place that we want to live in. So a lot of times, very often what we see is, especially in big towns, but in small towns too, that these decisions are made by a very few people in the township with very little regard to or information from most of the people in the town. So what the Heart and Soul Community Development Model does is gives you an opportunity to provide a voice to the people in the town. So this is the work that we were doing. We do this by gathering stories, right? So we do storytelling circles, story gathering, and then we listen to those stories, try to identify themes. So when this opportunity came to us about, becoming a community scribe, it really appealed to me, to all of us, but to me in particular, because I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to be able to learn how to interview our neighbors and learn, you know, in more effectively, to more effectively interview and get them to tell us their stories, right? Because that's what journalism is really, right? Is learning how to get a story from people and to make that story more relatable, to make it matter, right? So that when you as journalists are getting folks to tell you their stories, you're telling it in a way that makes it matter to more people, right? So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to get folks to tell us their stories in a way that made people understand that this matters, their voice matters. What matters to them will matter to everybody. So we do that, and we're able to identify themes and find out what matters most to most of the people in our township. So that's how I came to this. But in going through the curriculum and going through the workshops and speaking with the other members of the community scribe team, it came to mean a lot more to me personally. You know, we started having those discussions and conversations about, journalism as a way to a more equitable democracy, a more effective democracy. You know, because we're not just talking about stories in my township, where, you know, I started looking at the news in a whole different way, you know, and especially in the present situation that we're all in, with talks of this talk of fake news and you know, listening to half truths, and what do you listen to, and you know, who's telling you what. I mean, effective journalism and honest journalism has come to take on a whole new importance to me personally, and I think to all of us. You know, it's very difficult to participate effectively in our democracy if we don't have the information that we need, right? And so that's where journalists come in. And so, I mean, I don't want to go down that, a rabbit hole, because I do want to allow time for conversation, but that just gives you a kind of I think a little bite of why this has become so important, not only to me, but I think to all of us. And anyway, I'll just leave it at that, and I look forward to hearing from you all.
I think we're going to go a little bit down the rabbit hole, Debbie, because I mean, I think that's a really important part of this work that we do, right? I mean, I love hearing about what both you and Eric articulated in the way of storytelling, right? I think that's what knits, you know, those of us on the panel together, is that and those are the organizations we represent and the towns we represent together, right? Is that we all come at this project of storytelling in really different kinds of ways, right? And yet we've all seen it enable community change effectively. So I think, if I could ask everybody, you know, if you would be so great as to speak a little bit about how you have all seen those connections between journalism and community change in the work that you do. Do you want?
So
I don't know who wants to start. Yeah, Debbie, that would be great.
I'll start.
Perfect.
So my background, or the work that I do, my 9 to 5, if you want to call it that, is I work for a nonprofit. So I work for a nonprofit called Span Parent Advocacy Network, and we do a lot of advocacy, technical assistance around parents of students with disabilities. And another reason that I really, you know, fell in love with this program is it's very much in line with the work that we do on SPAN, which is getting, you know, in our public policy advocacy, which is around students with disabilities. We do a lot of storytelling as well, right? So we're getting parents and students, youth advocates, youth self-advocates, to talk about programs and policies that affect students with disabilities. And again, when you're talking about advocacy or changing people's minds, it's really important that they understand how this affects you, how any of these conversations, how people are affected by what we're talking about. And the best way to do that is just to tell them your story, right? Is to tell them your story, tell them, you know, the who, what, where, and why, you know, how of what you're talking about, how it's affected you. We can look at all the graphs we want, and I'm a big believer in data and the importance of data, but unless you understand what these numbers mean to people at a very root level, get down to when you're talking about root cause analysis, if you're really looking at how all these numbers, what all these numbers mean and how they affect people, you have to tell their story. You have to get people to understand, people who are decision makers, who are in a position to do something about it. You have to get them to understand how people are affected. And so again, storytelling has become a big part of the work that I do. And again, also not only in advocacy, but also in terms of fundraising. If you want, funders to give you money, they have to understand why your work is important. And again, the best way to do that is to get people to tell the story of how your work has affected them. So storytelling touches all of us in so many ways. And so learning how to do it well, is something that has become a great interest to me. I mean, I always say that this may become my second, my post-retirement advocation. So thank you, Valerie and Cole, for that.
That's great. And it kind of brings to mind you talking about the importance of story for your work and the organization, right? And even just the advocacy that you're doing. And that's part of, I think, our purpose and goal of a program like this is to, at least like our intervention in like supporting local news for journalism and design is around not just like supporting newsrooms, but how do we better equip more people to gather and share high quality information and to be able to tell stories. And I think a lot of this, even like the programs that we're doing at community colleges, this program, for instance, it's not just for people who like want to go get a job in a newsroom, right? Like Debbie, this might be your second act, right? You might go that path, and that's amazing, right? Yeah. And at the same time, like these skills are just useful, in your day-to-day life. Like you talked about the importance of, staying informed, to democracy, right? To think about equity and just to get information and share stories. And it comes that we talk about this a lot, in our focus on system thinking and how journalism can be a tool for structural change, right? And how we think about that, the role of journalism in structural change. And a lot of that comes into narrative, right? And when you talk to people in communities around, what do they want to see from local news? And I know a lot of us on this call probably like had these conversations, right? It's about, people tell you, oh, well, there's about these problematic narratives about their communities, or, that they feel like they're misunderstood or not, their story's not getting out. And, part of this is really, sharing the power, right, for people to be able to tell those stories effectively, to inform and shift those narratives where they need to be shifted, right, to equip, people in our communities with those tools, those skills to be able to realize that kind of like narrative shift, those changes that they want to see, right? And so that's where I really appreciate that perspective, Debbie, because I think that's kind of like the heart and what we were hoping for with this type of program. What we want to build on really is, how do we look at these tools of journalism? How do we share them more broadly so that people are more equipped to be able to like look at and counter problematic narratives, and also just be able to be more informed and engaged, and to make sure that, you mentioned like all of the like we have so much information, to be able to sift through all of the information and facts that are out there to be able to tell a truthful story too, right? And to get the facts that we need.
Eric, did you want to jump in at all? I know we're keeping an eye on time.
I know we're tight on time, but I'm so grateful for the way the conversation has gone, to say that with Transform South Jersey, I often get asked, what are we trying to transform? And I'll admit, I wasn't there at the very, very, very beginning. So I didn't get to name it. I didn't get to, but I subscribed to what we were trying to do. And I think the thing that we are trying to transform is the narrative that gets told about South Jersey communities. So while Transform South Jersey is very, not laser focused, but very prioritizing leveraging existing community leadership, giving them working with the resources, the capital, the skills that they already have, and that's social capital, physical capital, financial capital. We recognize very early on that the narrative that gets told about these communities can bypass all those things, bypass the reality that's there, bypass the hopes and aspirations that's there, And I mean, the narrative is something that not needs to be controlled from a authoritative, like this evil place, but it is controlled. And so how can we best leverage and influence the folk, not influence, but leverage the folks that are already there, that already have the ability to contribute to that narrative, and help them have a platform to do that. That's why we got involved, and that's what we're seeing already. So someone like Debbie, who has her formal 9-to-5, is working for a nonprofit, but also involved in these other things, is now able to say, hey, I can take this little bit of information that's available to me over here, this little bit of information that's available to me through my formal, my 9-to-5, this information that's available to me through my volunteer activities, and influence what gets told about her community and our communities. I mean, it's a South Jersey community. It's bigger than just one individual town.
I can see so many of the things that you're talking about are being picked up in the chat already, but I think it's a good time to open it up to Q&A.
So we have a bunch of conversation going on in the chat, and I don't know if you want to scroll through and highlight a few that you want to address, or if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question. I can unmute you and you can do so. Just use the raise your hand feature under the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom window.
But one thing I just wanted to, I see, I think a comment from Jane around storytellers must be credited and need to be compensated. Completely agree that this isn't just like volunteer work. I think it's work that we all, what we like to say, like everybody commits acts of journalism every day, right? Or just by scrolling and sharing something on social media, like that can be seen as like an act of journalism. And so it's better, part of this is better equipping people to just be more informed about what they share, what we consume, what kind of information we put out there and share with our communities. Now, a big piece of this work is also how do we create more opportunities for people to be compensated, right? We do need professional journalists. This isn't just about like, that we actually need, right? The professionals and people who are focusing on, finding and sharing, like telling these stories, sharing that information, and working in concert with community members, I think is the key of like how we connect those. And so, there are lots of different programs that we're learning from and trying to build on. The programs like Documenters, I know there's Bloomfield and Stories of Atlantic City. A lot of the work that's happening in New Jersey, I think people are really looking to that. So totally agree. And it's something that I think that, we want to work on and support as well.
I did see one comment or question in the chat about whether or not these are going to replace journalism jobs or if they are going to supplement or complement them.
Yeah, I think similarly, I don't think that these are like in place of journalism jobs. Obviously, we've lost a ton of specifically local journalism jobs, right? This isn't like an either or situation. It's a both and, right? We need both. We're not advocating that like this is the solution. It's when we look at it from an ecosystem, like a systems approach, like we need the entire system to be functional, to be healthier, right? To be resilient. And that's part of like, what we're the focus and the intervention that we're looking at here is like, how do we, better, make folks across the system, how do we make the system healthier? And that means like sharing those tools, sharing these skills and opening up more opportunities to participate in journalism and storytelling so that we can have a healthier system. And so I think it's a both and.
I agree. And not only that, but I think we have to be aware of just the fact of our changing society, right? So, every time I look at the news at night and I watch the weather and I see all the weather footage that they're getting from, somebody's iPhone. And I remember, because I do photography is another hobby that I do, that I have. And I'm like, they're always asking people to send photos in. And I'm like, well, that's somebody gets paid to do that, right? So, but now there's just so much easy access, right? In terms of information that we're able to access, information that newsrooms are able to access. And so, I mean, like you said, there's been such a, there's been a change in terms of the amount of print journalism that's around, in terms of like just being able to go pick up a newspaper. I know I'm from Philadelphia. I live in South Jersey, but I'm originally from Philadelphia, and we used to have the Bulletin and all other, avenues that don't exist anymore. And that's not as a result of community journalists. It's just, there's just people, it's just the way people access their news. But to the person's point that mentioned this, like, and to Cole's point, I don't think that it's an either or either. I think, in fact, another service that I think that this program provides is demystifying, I think, journalism for a lot of people, because, when we talk about telling our stories and getting our story out there, for me personally, I mean, just reaching out to a local journalist was not something I would ever have thought of doing. Whereas now that's not necessarily the case. And I think that as journalists, I think it's beneficial to be more accessible to people who have stories. If your job is telling stories, you want people to reach you and be able to say, I have this great story to tell. Can you tell it for me? Because everybody's not going to be a community scribe, right? There are a lot of people that need people to tell their stories, and their stories are important. So you have to think about, well, who are you getting your stories from, like you said? And I think you touched on that a little bit. Who are you prioritizing in terms of storytelling? Whose stories are being told? So what are we seeing when we look in the newspaper and we see a story? Who's telling that story? So this when we talk about community scribes, to me anyway, it's not just about me writing my story. It's about, folks, down the block from me having somebody who's going to be able to share their story, whether it's me or a professional journalist. But, whose stories are being prioritized, whose stories that we're reading are being prioritized, and who's telling those stories. That could be me, could be somebody else. But it's important that these perspectives, these are diverse perspectives, are shared.
We have Jeff Pierce has his hand raised. I think we have time. Jeff, if you can keep it under 30 seconds, then we might have time for an answer.
Sure. Question is, how do you try and share your stories for the communities that you're working in?
Is that for me or?
Yeah, well, for you, Debbie, certainly, or anyone else who wanted to chime in around the projects that you're doing.
I've quickly realized that if I put a picture of my wife in any social media post, it gets amplified 1,000%. So if it's important, regardless of what it is, I just throw my wife in, and that's how I get the stories out there. No matter what I do individually, it doesn't get much uptake. But
I just to jump in there real quick too, I would say, like, this is part of our focus on like design. The design piece is, and one of the modules that we did with the scribes was thinking about, like, how do we take, and again, if you look at some of our tools, this kind of comes through in the process, which is, how do we get creative and think about alternative ways to produce and share high quality news information and stories that really resonate with people that, meet people where they're at, right? And so that's kind of an iterative process that you can go through to get, and we want those grassroots solutions. So it's even working with folks in the communities to say, hey, how would you like to get news and information, right? Like, what are the ways that you would like this story to be told? And then going that way, right? Because a lot of times we have like our platforms, we have the things that we're producing for, but to take a step back and to really listen to what people need, where they're already consuming information and what that can look like. And so it opens up a lot of possibility to what the actual output could be. I like to say, like, if you boil journalism down to like the collection, the analysis, and the distribution of information and stories, then the product can look like anything, right? It could be a play, it could be a news article, it could be an Instagram post, it could be a lot of different things. So I think part of it, I'd point you to like the design piece is like a way that we're looking to I guess like a pathway to opening up and to make it more responsive to what communities, how they want to get news information.
Yeah, and to just wrap up, and I think on a practical note, right, this program is going to continue on through the spring, and as we were talking about earlier, in other forms of work that NJCH and J&D are doing together. I think it was really important that for a next step, we started by taking all of the community scribes and kind of polling them about the people that they thought were doing great work in their communities, great existing local journalism in their communities. And when they said we want to meet them, we want to get in touch with them, we put a mixer together and we had like 35 people together a couple of weeks ago where our community scribes were talking to some of the people whose coverage that they've been following for years, including people who are commenting, I see in the chat, people like Clyde Hughes, right? People who are already doing this work in the state were trying to take practical steps to put the scribes together and make the introductions and then connect them with some of the outlets that are already doing this fantastic work. And we're not going to stop. So I'm really thankful to all of you for this fantastic discussion today, for all of the suggestions and thoughts in the chat. For more information about this, you can visit our website at njch.org and talk with any of us. We're happy to speak with you about the programs.